So Cindy's. So anyway, so let's do Deuteromy chapter 6, amen. So a call for a wholehearted commitment. These are the commands, decrees, and regulations that the Lord your God commanded me to teach you. You must obey them in the land you are about to enter and occupy. And you and your children and grandchildren must fear the Lord your God as long as you live. If you obey all his decrees and commands, you will enjoy a long life. Listen closely, Israel, and be careful to obey. Then all will go well with you, and you will have many children in the land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And you must commit yourself wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you are on the road. When you are going to bed and when you are getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as a reminder. Write them on doorposts of your house and on your gates. The Lord your God soon bring you into the land he swore to you when he made a vow to your ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It is a land with large, prosperous cities that you did not build. The houses will be richly stocked with goods you did not produce, and you will draw water from cisterns you did not dig, and you will eat from my vineyards and olive trees you did not plant. When you have eaten your fill in this land, be careful not to forget the Lord who rescued you from slavery in the land of Egypt. You must fear the Lord your God and serve him. When you take an oath, you must use only his name. When you take an oath, you must use only his name, and you must not worship any of the gods of the neighboring nations. For the Lord your God who lives among you is a jealous God. His anger will flare up against you, and he will wipe you from the face of the earth. You must not test the Lord your God as you did when you complained at Massah. You must diligently obey the commands of the Lord your God, all the laws and decrees he has given you. Do what is right and good in that Lord's sight, so all will go well with you. Then you will enter in occupy the good land that the Lord swore to give your ancestors, and you will drive out all the enemies living in the land, just as the Lord said you would. In the future, your children will ask you, what is the meaning of these laws, decrees, and regulations that the Lord our God has commanded us to obey? Then you must tell them, we were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt, but the Lord brought us out of Egypt with his strong hand, and the Lord did miracle signs and wonders before our eyes, dealing terrifying blows against Egypt and Pharaoh and all his people. He brought us out of Egypt so he could give us this land, and he has sworn to give our ancestors. And the Lord our God commanded us to obey all these decrees and to fear him, so he can continue to bless us and preserve our lives as he has done to this day. For we will be counted, we will obey all his. It says, for we will be counted as righteous when we obey all the commands the Lord our God has given us. Can you hold on and to brush my teeth? I was on the third freaking guy next door. Moaning. These freaking perverts. So, Deuteronomy. No, that was Deuteronomy chapter 6 I just read. Oh my goodness. I just wasted one of them. So Deuteronomy chapter 6 means in this book of chapter of Deuteronomy that contains the famous passage known as the Shema, which declares the oneness of God, and Ephesians the importance of wholehearted love and obedience to Him. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, Moses addresses the Israelites, preparing them for the new life in the promised land. He phrases the commandments and statutes that God has given them and encourages them to teach these commandments to their children. The chapter also contains the instruction to recite the Shema, a prayer affirming the oneness of God and the call to love Him with all one's heart, soul, and strength. Deuteronomy chapter 6 teaches us several significant lessons. The oneness of God, the chapter emphasizes the fundamental belief in the oneness of God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord of God is one. Deuteronomy chapter 6:4, the declaration affirms. Wait, hold on. So, no, the doctrine of Trinity does not contradict monotheism. In fact, the doctrine of Trinity, by definition, asserts that there is only one God. The doctrine of the Trinity does not teach that there are three gods, but rather one God who exists as three persons. It's strictly monotheistic. It does not deny monotheism to suggest that the one true God is not as systemic as human, as a mere nature and His personal nature. Those outside the historic Christian faith very often mispresent this doctrine. The Quran, for example, tells Christians in Surah 4, verse 171, do not say there, this is it better for you. Indeed, Allah is but one God, as if we were saying there are three gods instead of one. Likewise, the Jehovah's Witness pamphlet, should you believe the Trinity, asserts that monotheism does not allow for a Trinity. Orthodox Jews also frequently raise objections to the Trinity, like, we believe in one God, not three. The assumption in each of these cases is that the Trinity means more than one God. It is easy to demonstrate that this is not the case. And I don't know if that guy is like into Jewish stuff, because he might be against my Christian belief. That's why he acts the way he does. I don't know what his deal is, but it's like crazy. Wholeheartedly, the one basic, the one main thing is that I love God and I'm for all doing right. Even though I'm not perfect, I'll get back on track. So, Deuteronomy chapter 6:4 is this declaration affirms modalism and serves as a foundational statement of faith for the Israelites and for our believers. Wholehearted love for God. The chapter emphasizes the call to love God with all one's heart, soul, and strength. This love is to be the driving force behind everything we do, shaping our thoughts, actions, and priorities. It is called to wholehearted devotion in the intimate relationship with God. Teaching future generations, Moses instructs the Israelites to diligently teach the commandments of God to their children. This underscores the importance of passing down the faith from one generation to the next, teaching that the generations about God's commandments and his faithfulness ensures the concentration of the covenant relationship and the transmission of God's truth. In the application, while the specific context of the Israelites entering the promised land may differ from our lives as Christians today, we can still draw practical applications from Deuteronomy chapter 6. Affirming God's oneness, let us affirm and embrace the belief in the oneness of God, recognize that he is the one and only true God and center of our lives on him alone. This understanding helps us prioritize our relationship with him and guard against the influence of false gods or worldly distractions. Wholeheartedly love for God, cultivate a deep and genuine love for God. Let this love be the driving force behind all that we do, our thoughts, actions, and relationships. Seek to grow in intimacy with God, spending time in prayer, studying his Bible, word, and allowing his love to transform our hearts. Teaching the next generation, recognize the responsibility of passing down our faith to the next generation, whether as parents, mentors, or leaders, and let us diligently teach the commandments and truth of God to the younger ones. Provide them with a foundation of faith and equip them to carry on the legacy of God's truth. In summary, Deuteronomy chapter 6 teaches us about the oneness of God, the call to wholeheartedly love for him, and the importance of teaching future generations. May we affirm God's wondrous love with him and with our whole being, and be eternal in passing down our faith to the next generation. So we're in Deuteronomy chapter 7 now. I'm not sure why I'm saying it's Deuteronomy chapter 7. When the Lord your God brings you into a land you are about to enter, occupy it, here or clear away. Enter and occupy it. He will clear away many nations ahead of you: the Hittites, the Geshurites, the Amorites, and the Kenites, and Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. These 7 nations are greater and more numerous than you. When the Lord your God hands these nations over to you and conquer them, you must completely destroy them and make no treaties with them and show them no mercy. You must not intermarry with them. Do not let your daughters and sons marry their sons and daughters, for they will lead your children away from me to worship other gods. Then the anger of the Lord will burn against you, and he will quickly destroy you. This is what you must do. You must break down their pagan altars and shatter their sacred pillars, cut down their Asherah poles and burn their idols, for you are a holy people who belong to the Lord your God. Of all the people on the earth, the Lord your God has chosen you to be his own special treasure. The Lord did not set his heart on you and chose you because you were more numerous than other nations, for you were the smallest of all nations. Rather, it was simply that the Lord loves you, and he was keeping the oath he had sworn to your ancestors. That is why the Lord rescued you with such a strong hand from your slavery and from the oppressive hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Understand, therefore, that the Lord your God is indeed God. He is the faithful God who keeps his covenant for 1,000 generations and lavishes his unfailing love on those who love him and obey his commands. But he does not hesitate to punish and destroy those who reject him. Therefore, you must obey these commands, decrees, and regulations I'm giving you today. If you listen to these regulations and faithfully obey them, the Lord your God will keep his covenant of unfailing love with you, as he promised with an oath to your ancestors. He will love you and bless you, and he will give you many children. He will give fertility to your land and your animals. When you arrive in the land he swore to give your ancestors, you will have large harvests of grain, new wine, and olive oil, and great herds of cattle, sheep, and goats. You will be blessed above all the nations of the earth. None of your men or women will be childless, and all of your livestock will bring young. And the Lord will protect you from all sickness, and he will not let you suffer from the terrible diseases you knew in Egypt, but he will inflict them on all your enemies. You must destroy all the nations the Lord your God hands over to you. Show them no mercy, and do not worship their gods, or they will trap you. Perhaps you will think to yourself, how can we ever conquer these nations that are so much more powerful than we are? But don't be afraid of them. Just remember what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and all the land of Egypt. Remember the great terrors the Lord your God sent against them. You saw it all with your own hands, your own eyes, and remember the miracle signs and wonders and the strong hand and powerful arm with which he brought you out of Egypt. The Lord your God will use the same power against all the people you fear. And then the Lord your God will send terror to drive out the few survivors still hiding from you. No, do not be afraid of those nations, for the Lord your God is among you, and he is a great and awesome God. The Lord your God will drive those nations out ahead of you little by little. You will not clear them away all at once, otherwise the wild animals would multiply too quickly for you. But the Lord your God will hand them over to you, and he will throw them into complete confusion until they are destroyed. He will put their kings in your power, and you will erase their names from the face of the earth, and no one will be able to stand against you, and you will destroy all them all. You must burn their idols in fire, and you must cover the silver of gold that covers them. You must not take it, or it will become a trap to you, for it is detestable to the Lord your God. Do not bring any detestable objects into your home, for then you will be destroyed just like them. You must utterly detest such things, for they are set apart for destruction. Deuteronomy chapter 7. So that was Deuteronomy chapter 7. Whoops, sorry. I don't know why I put that in there like that. Like, oh my god. So I was like, to him, he was like, I was like, well, like, you was on Facebook dating app and whatever, and like, women want to see like updated photos of you. Trying to give him a hint, but that is a true statement. Women do want to see the updated appearance of a man of what he looks like now, not years ago when he was younger. And then he was like, and then I was like, I want to see you now, like what you look like. And then he sent me a picture, and I'm not sure if it's real. He said it is upload picture now. That's what he's saying. So we're in Deuteronomy chapter 7. Come on, what's the matter? So Deuteronomy chapter 7 is a chapter in the book of Deuteronomy that contains God's instructions to the Israelites regarding their relationship with the inhabitants of the promised land and the importance of remaining faithful to him. Deuteronomy chapter 7, Moses continues his exhortation to the Israelites as they prepare to enter the promised land. He phrases the importance of remaining separate from the surrounding nations and not forming alliances with them or adopting their idolatrous practices. Moses reminds the Israelites of God's faithfulness and the covenant he made with them, urging them to obey his commandments and trust in his promises. Deuteronomy chapter 7 teaches us several significant lessons, being faithfulness to God. The chapter emphasizes the importance of remaining faithful to God and not compromising our devotion to him. God reminds the Israelites that he has chosen them as his treasured possession and caused them to be a holy people, set apart from the surrounding nations. There serves as a reminder for us to prioritize our relationships with God and stay committed to him even in the face of temptation or pressure to conform to worldly practices. Moses warns the Israelites against intermarriage or forming alliances with the inhabitants of the promised land who worship false gods. He emphasizes the danger of idolatry and the consequences it can bring. This teaches us the importance of guarding our hearts and minds against anything that may lead us away from the true worship of God. Moses reminds the Israelites of God's faithfulness in delivering them from Egypt and his covenant with them, and he encourages them to trust in God's promises and to remember his mighty acts on their behalf. This serves as a reminder for us to reflect on God's faithfulness in our lives, knowing that he is trustworthy and will fulfill his promises. We can still draw practical applications from Deuteronomy 7 when we remain faithful to God, and let us prioritize our relationship with God and remain faithful to him. This involves seeking his guidance and wisdom in all areas of our lives, making choices that align with his word, the Bible, and staying committed to him even when we face challenges or temptations. Guard against adultery, recognizing the dangers of adultery in our lives. Adultery can take various forms today, such as placing material possessions, relationships, or personal desires above God. Let us guard our hearts and minds, ensuring that our worship and devotion are directly solely toward the one true God. Reflect on God's faithfulness. Take time to reflect on God's faithfulness in your life. Recall the ways he has delivered, provided, and guided you. This reflection builds our faith and confidence in God's promises, reminding us that he is trustworthy and worthy of our devotion. In summary, Deuteronomy 7 teaches us about the importance of faithfulness to God, avoiding adultery, and reflecting on God's faithfulness. and covenant. May we remain faithful to God and guard against adultery and continually and reflect on his faithfulness in our lives. So that's Deuteronomy chapter 7. We're now in Deuteronomy chapter 8. And a call to remember and obey in Deuteronomy chapter 8. Be careful to obey all my commands I am giving you today, then you will live and multiply, and you will enter and occupy the land the Lord swore to give your ancestors. Remember how the Lord your God led you through the wilderness for these 40 years, humbling you and testing you, and to prove your character and to find out whether or not you would obey his commands. Yes, he humbled you by letting you go hungry and then feeding you with manna, a food previously unknown to you and your ancestors. He did it to teach you that people do not live by bread alone. Rather, we live by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. For all these 40 years, your clothes didn't wear out and your feet didn't blister or swell. Think about it. Just as a parent disciplines a child, the Lord your God disciplines you for your own good. So obey the commands of the Lord your God by walking in his ways and fearing him. For the Lord your God is bringing you into good land, flowing with streams and pools of water, with fountains and springs that gush out in the valleys and hills. It is a land of wheat and barley, of grapevines, fig trees, and pomegranates, of olive oil and honey. It is a land where food is plentiful and nothing is lacking. It is a land where iron is as common as stones and copper is abundant in the hills. And when you have eaten your fill, be sure to praise the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. It says, but that is the time to be careful. Be aware in your plenty you do not forget the Lord your God and disobey his commands, regulations, and decrees that I am giving you today. For when you have become full and prosperous and have built fine homes to live in, and when your flocks and herds have become very large, and your silver and gold have multiplied along with everything else, be careful. Do not become proud at the time and forget the Lord your God, who rescued you from slavery in the land of Egypt. Do not forget that he led you through the great and terrifying wilderness with its poisons, snakes, and scorpions, where it was so hot and dry. He gave you water from the rock, and he fed you with manna in the wilderness, a food unknown to your ancestors. He did this to humble you and test you for your own good. He did all this so that you would never say to yourself, I have achieved this wealth with my own strength and energy. That's what a lot of people do, especially the rich people in the industry. You see how they act, they think they're better than somebody. Flocks and herds have become very large, and your silver, and poison, where it was so hot and dry. He gave you water from a rock, and he fed you with manna in the wilderness, a food unknown to your ancestors. He did this to humble you and test you for your own good. He did all this so that you would never say to yourself, I have achieved this wealth with my own strength and energy. Remember the Lord your God. He is the one who gives you power to be successful in order to fulfill the covenant he confirmed to your ancestors with an oath. But I assure you of this, if you ever forget the Lord your God and follow other gods, worshiping and bowing down to them, you will certainly be destroyed, just as the Lord has destroyed other nations in your path, and you will be destroyed if you refuse to obey the Lord your God. So Deuteronomy chapter 8 verse 1 tells us to obey God's commands. We do this by obeying God with our mind, by learning about Him and His Word, the Bible, our will by committing ourselves completely to Him, our body by using our energy and talents according to His rules, not ours, our money by remembering that all the money and other nice things we have come from God and really belong to Him, not us, our heart by loving Him more than anything else, our future by deciding to spend our lives doing things for God and other people. Like the Samaritan showed care even for the person that he didn't know, because that's what the Bible teaches, to care for people, regardless if you don't know them or not. Something that God doesn't know. Whoops, sorry. So we're at Deuteronomy chapter 8. So Deuteronomy chapter 8 is a chapter in the book of Deuteronomy that serves as a reminder to the Israelites about God's faithfulness and provision and the purpose behind their wilderness journey. In Deuteronomy chapter 8, Moses continues his address to the Israelites, recounting their journey through the wilderness and preparing them for life in the promised land. He reminds them of God's guidance, provision of manna, and the purpose behind their trials in the wilderness. Moses warns them not to forget God when they experience prosperity in the land, and to remember that everything they have comes from God. Deuteronomy chapter 8 teaches us several important lessons: God's faithfulness and provision. The chapter highlights God's faithfulness and provision for the Israelites throughout their wilderness journey. Despite their hardships and challenges, God sustained them with manna, met their needs, and led them to the promised land. This serves as a reminder of God's faithfulness in our lives, that He provides for our needs and guides us through difficult times. The purpose of trials. Moses emphasizes that the purpose behind the Israelites' trials in the wilderness was to humble them, test their hearts, and teach them to depend on God. It was a lesson in trust and reliance on God's provision rather than their own strengths. This reminds us that trials and challenges in our lives can serve a purpose in shaping our character, deepening our trust in God, and teaching us valuable lessons. Gratitude and humility. Moses warns against forgetting God and becoming prideful. When the Israelites experienced prosperity in the promised land, he reminds them to remember that everything they have is a result of God's provision, and to remind them to remain faithful, to remain grateful and humble before Him. This teaches us the importance of cultivating a grateful heart and recognizing that every good thing we have comes from God. The practical applications from Deuteronomy 8 is acknowledges God's faithfulness. Take time to reflect on God's faithfulness in your life. Recognize His provision, guidance, and blessings. Cultivate an attitude of gratitude and trust in His continuing faithfulness, even in times of difficulty or uncertainty. Learn from trials. When faced with trials and challenges, seek to learn from them and grow in faith. Trust that God has a purpose for allowing these difficulties and asking Him to teach you valuable lessons through them. Rely on His strength and provision rather than relying solely on your own abilities. Practice gratitude and humility. Develop a habit of gratitude and humility in your daily lives, and recognize that everything you have is a gift from God, and approach life with a humble heart knowing that you are dependent on His provision. Express gratitude to God for His blessings and seek to use them for His glory and the benefit of others. Deuteronomy chapter 8 reminds us of God's faithfulness and provision, the purpose behind trials, and the importance of gratitude and humility. May we acknowledge God's faithfulness in our lives, learn from trials, and cultivate an attitude of gratitude and humility as we trust in provision. So we're in Deuteronomy chapter 9 yet, and we'll just read that one and then we'll be done. So Deuteronomy chapter 9, it says, "Listen, O Israel, today you are about to cross the Jordan River to take over the land belonging to nations much greater and more powerful than you. They live in cities with walls that reach to the sky. The people are strong and tall, descendants of the famous Canaanite giants. You heard the saying, 'Who can stand up to the Canaanites?' But recognize today that the Lord your God is the one who will cross you over ahead of you like a devouring fire to destroy them. He will subdue them so that you will quickly conquer them and drive them out, just as the Lord has promised. After the Lord your God done this for you, don't say in your heart, 'The Lord has given us this land.'" So it says God's mercy in Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 1-6. If the Israelites were unrighteous and stubborn, why did God make such wonderful promises to them? There are two good reasons. Number one, God and Israel had a covenant. Genesis chapter 15-17, Exodus 19-20. God promised to be faithful to them, and they promised to obey Him. Even though the Israelites rarely held up their end of the bargain, God remained faithful. Second, to God, unconditional mercy made Him willing to restore His people, no matter how many times they turned from Him. It is comforting to know that despite our inconsistencies and sins, God loves us unconditionally. Eternal life is not achieved on the merit system, but on the mercy system. God loves us no matter who we are or what we have done. Believe it. I don't know how you turn this thing on. Is it blurry? It's not supposed to be blurry. I don't know why this phone is so blurry. Hold on. So, are such good people? No, it's because of the wickedness of the other nations that He is punishing them out of your way. It is not because you are so good or have such integrity that you're about to occupy their land. The Lord your God will drive these nations out ahead of you only because of their wickedness, and to fulfill the oath He swore to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You must recognize that the Lord your God is not giving you this good land because you are good, for you are not. You are a stubborn people. And that's as it says in Romans, we're not good. Remembering the goat calf. Remember and never forget how angry you made the Lord your God out in the wilderness from the day you left Egypt until now. You have been constantly rebelling against him, even at Mount Sinai. You made the Lord so angry he was ready to destroy you. And this happened when I was on the mountain receiving the tablets of stone inscribed with the words of the covenant that the Lord had made with you. I was there for 40 days and 40 nights, and all the time I ate no food and drank no water. The Lord gave me the 2 tablets on which God had written with his own finger all the words he had spoken to you from the heart of the fire when you was assembled at the mountain. At the end of the 40 days and nights, the Lord handed me the 2 stone tablets inscribed with the words of the covenant. And then the Lord said to me, "Get up, go down immediately, for the people you brought out of Egypt have corrupted themselves. How quickly they have turned away from the way I commanded them to live. They have melted gold and made an idol for themselves." The Lord also said to me, "I have seen how stubborn and rebellious these people are. Leave me alone, so I may destroy them and erase their name from under heaven. Then I will make a mighty nations of your descendants, a nation larger and more powerful than they are." So while the mountain was blazing with fire, I turned and came down, holding in my hands the 2 stone tablets inscribed with the terms of the covenant. There below me I could see that you have sinned against the Lord and your God. You have melted the gold and made a calf idol for yourself. How quickly you had turned away from the path the Lord had commanded you to follow. So I took the 2 stone tablets and threw them to the ground and smashed them before your eyes. Then as before I threw myself down before as the Lord for 40 days and nights. I ate no bread and drank no water because of the great sin you had committed by doing what the Lord hated, provoking him to anger. I feared that the fierce anger of the Lord would turn him against you, would drive him to destroy you. But again he listened to me. The Lord was so angry with Aaron that he wanted to destroy him too. But I prayed for Aaron, and the Lord spared him. I took your sin, the calf you had made, and I melted it down in the fire and ground it into the fine dust. Then I burned the dust into the stream that flows down the mountain. You also made the Lord angry at the Tapnar Messiah and Kirpiat Heptai and Kadesh Barnea. The Lord sent you out with commands. Go up and take over the land I have given you, but you rebelled against the command of the Lord your God and refused to put your trust in him or obey him. Yes, you have been rebelling against the Lord as long as I have known you. That is why I threw myself down before the Lord for 40 days and nights. For the Lord has said he would destroy you. I prayed to the Lord and said, "O sovereign Lord, do not destroy them. They are your own people, and they are your special possession, whom you redeemed from Egypt by your mighty power and your strong hand. Please overlook the stubbornness and the lawful sin of these people, and remember instead your servants Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. If you destroy these people, the Egyptians will say the Israelites died because the Lord wasn't able to bring them to the land he had promised to give them." Or they might say he destroyed them because he hated them. He deliberately took them into the wilderness to slaughter them. But they are your people and your special possession, whom you brought out of Egypt by your great strength and power arm. So that was Deuteronomy chapter 9. Let's go there. Let's see. So Deuteronomy chapter 9 is a chapter in the book of Deuteronomy that recounts the Israelites' rebelling and disobedience during the wilderness journey and highlights God's mercy and grace towards them despite their shortcomings. In Deuteronomy 9, Moses continues to address this to the Israelites, reminding them of their past failures and the consequence of their disobedience. He recounts the indictment of the golden calf, where the Israelites turn away from the gold and worship a false idol. Moses phrases it was not due to their righteousness or merit that God chose them, but rather out of his love and faithfulness to the covenant with their ancestors. Deuteronomy 9 teaches us several significant lessons. The consequences of disobedience. The chapter highlights the consequences of the Israelites' disobedience and rebelling against God. Despite experiencing his miraculous deliverance from Egypt, they quickly turned away from him and worshiped a golden calf. This served as a reminder that disobedience to God's commands can lead to negative consequences and hinder our relationship with him. God's mercy and grace. Moses phrases God's mercy and grace towards the Israelites despite their rebellious behavior. He recounts instances where God could have destroyed them, but instead he chose to spare them and fulfill his promises. This reminds us that even in our moments of error and disobedience, God's mercy and grace are available to us. He is patient and loving and always ready to attend forgiveness and restore a relationship with him. Humanity and dependence on God. Moses reminds the Israelites that their success and victory in the Promised Land will not be due to their own righteousness, but because of God's faithfulness. He urges them to remember their past failures and to approach the future with humility and dependence on God's guidance and provision. This teaches us the importance of acknowledging our own limitations and relying on God's strength and wisdom in all aspects of our lives. While the specific context of the Israelites' rebellion and journey may differ from our lives today, as Christians, we can still draw practical applications from Deuteronomy chapter 9 by obeying God's commands. Learn from the Israelites' example and strive to obey God's commands. Recognize that disobedience can have negative consequences and hinder our relationship with Him. Seek to align your thoughts, actions, and decisions with His Word, the Bible, knowing that His commands are given for our well-being and to guide us in the righteousness. Embrace God's mercy and grace when we fall short or make mistakes. Remember that God's mercy and grace are available to us. Approach Him with repentance, seeking His forgiveness and restoration, understanding that His love and faithfulness are not based on our own righteousness, but on His character and covenant promises. The practice of humility and dependence. Cultivate humility in your relationship with God and recognize that your success and victories come from Him. Avoid pride and self-reliance, acknowledging your need to His guidance and provision. Seek His wisdom and strength in all areas of your life. Lean in on Him rather than relying solely on your own abilities. And then the summary, Deuteronomy 9 teaches us about the consequences of disobedience and God's mercy and grace and the importance of humanity and dependence on God. May we strive to obey God's commands, embrace His mercy and grace, and practice humility and dependence on Him in our daily lives. And that was it.